That's the first part of the answer. So SM-6, SM-2, Tomahawk, Maritime Strike Tomahawk in the future for aircraft, LRASM, those are all the munitions we need to pursue for a threat against China.
Okay, thank you. Yield back my time.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for your service and for your time this afternoon. I have the privilege of representing New Mexico's 2nd District, home to White Sands Missile Range and Holloman Air Force Base. Both bases face a unique set of challenges, particularly around the availability of quality housing for service members and their families. Holloman Air Force Base is currently at 99% capacity, probably about 100% by now, for on-base housing, forcing service members and their families to live off base in a rural community where options are limited and more expensive, if they even exist at all. And so even on base, the housing isn't much better. It's outdated, it's deteriorating, and it fails to meet the standards of what we owe our airmen and women and our service members. Lieutenant General Spain, the department's status quo for housing has been insufficient. Beyond simply updating aging units, what steps is the Air Force taking in fiscal year 26 to meet the housing demands at rural installations like Holloman?
Thanks, Representative Vasquez. Appreciate your time and the question and the opportunity to talk about Holloman. Number one, for Holloman specifically, we just initiated a housing requirements analysis effort that's ongoing that should complete this summer, and that'll give us specific recommendations to work with the community to adjust our capacity at that location. And that's typically how we do that and how we intend to move out in other rural locations is a housing analysis, assess the capacity, and then what way we can work with the community directly to improve that circumstance.
Thank you, Lieutenant General. I appreciate that, and I know our airmen and women and some of their families, as well as the unaccompanied service members, really appreciate that, especially being home to the MQ-9 Reaper program and the pilot trainers who are so critical to our defense here. At White Sands Missile Range, much of the housing on base also dates back to post-World War II era, and it's seen minimal upgrades in the decades since. General Mingus, last summer, White Sands Missile Range and Fort Bliss were supposed to receive roughly $7 million from the Army's Installation Management Command to improve legacy housing. That funding never materialized. Could you explain why those funds were not distributed, when White Sands can expect to receive those funds, and what the Army is doing in fiscal year 26 to improve housing quality in rural bases?
Yes, sir. Start off to echo your point, Wismar is incredibly important to us. That's where our Army Test and Evaluation Command does the vast majority of our high-end missile tests, and anything that requires range and quality of life there. We've also designated that recently as a remote and isolated place, which helps with a lot of the things you're talking about. That $7 million is still earmarked against that improvements. That proposal is about ready to go out, so I think you'll see some movement on that here shortly, sir.
Thank you so much. I thank you and the community of Las Cruces and Alamogordo and the folks at White Sands Missile Range. Thank you for that. Last week, I voted in this committee to provide this department with an additional $9 billion for quality of life improvements, including housing, because I firmly believe we owe it to our service members. But I also don't want to see that money wasted. General Mingus and Lieutenant General Spain, how will you ensure that this additional funding is a good use of taxpayer dollars to provide adequate housing and additional quality of life services for members in rural districts like mine?
Specific to the reconciliation bill, sir?
That's correct.
Yeah. We expect, and I think it'll be about equal across the services, so I think we'll see about $2 billion. If you remember from our testimony last year, both the Secretary and the Chief, we were able to take our 255 barracks that needed renovation. We were able to deal with almost all of those minus 55, which this $2 billion is already earmarked against those 55 that still need to be moved from Q3 to Q4 up to Q1, Q2.
Thanks again. So for the Air Force, I think we're going to be able to, well, once we see what the details are of the language and of the legislation, we'll know exactly what is coming to the Air Force and what we'll be able to accomplish. We certainly have a significant deferred maintenance package in this space across the Air Force, and a long list of things that we'll need to complete based on the additional funding if it comes to fruition. But certainly housing, family housing and unaccompanied housing are top on the list for the Air Force. We have a long list of projects that we can complete if we are granted the authority.
Thank you, Lieutenant General, and thank you, General, for your answers. Housing is one of the biggest challenges that we face, especially in places like Alamogordo, New Mexico, Las Cruces, New Mexico. And if folks don't have a safe, affordable place to live, it impacts not only their well-being, but their ability to do their jobs, and that affects our readiness as a nation. Readiness equals national security, and so investing in housing, infrastructure, and quality of life pays dividends down the line. Thank you all for your time and for your service to our country. I yield back the remainder of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank each of our witnesses for their service and their leadership. We are all very grateful for your commitment to this country and for the dedication that you provided over many, many years of service. Thanks, each of you. General Mingus, I represent some significant Army assets in Kansas, and I have a handful of questions I'd like to ask of you related to that. Like all of my colleagues, I read with interest the reports of the Army Transformation Initiative, and we're all beginning to sort through what that may mean long-term in terms of our strategic thinking and the role of our various ground forces. Can you talk a bit about, as we look forward in light of the initiative, how we should be thinking about the role of heavy ground forces, particularly heavy infantry divisions, in America's defense going forward? Where do they fit in what appears to be an increasingly mobile and agile thinking?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we still, as an Army, believe that there is a role, and the reason and what sets us apart from any other Army in the world is the combination of our light, striker, and heavy formations. Even though the acute threat and what we are all focused on is in Indo-PACOM and China, we're an Army that has to be prepared to go anywhere around the world. A lot of people like to look at some of the lessons learned coming out of Ukraine and say that the tank isn't going to survive. Heavy formations are not going to survive on the modern battlefield. No singular platform is designed to survive by itself. It's the combination of infantry, artillery, armor, engineers, and the sustainment that goes with that in a joint environment in a combined arms fashion that allows us to win in the future battlefields that are out there. So we think our heavy formations absolutely have a role to play in the future.
Thank you, sir. And in light of that, how should we be thinking, for example, obviously I have the 1st Infantry Division at Fort Riley. How should we be thinking in terms of our ability to rapidly deploy anywhere in the world, both our equipment and our personnel when the 911 call comes in, so to speak? How should we be shaping our thinking on that going forward?
Any activation of an O plan that requires the mobilization of and the movement of large formations is a huge undertaking. Our Forces Command at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, does a tabletop every year to make sure that those mass mobilization capabilities across our active Guard and Reserve are there. The other, you can call it a benefit, or the thing that we have reaped the results of, having had 2 heavy brigade combat teams rotating back and forth to Europe for the last 3 years, has exercised those muscles on a pretty grand scale that we have not seen in a while.
Thank you. And on a related note, again, thinking about the 1st Infantry, although this question is applicable obviously much more broadly to our ground forces in the continental United States, as we take in lessons learned, not only from what we've observed in Ukraine, but particularly there, as well as others, the increasing role of small, relatively inexpensive unmanned aerial systems, and the need to integrate those with our ground operations going forward, both in our planning and in our training. How should we be thinking about that sort of interactive training of small UASs and our existing heavy ground forces in the continental United States?
So the Germans took the tank, the plane, and the radio and put it together in a meaningful way between 1938 and 39 and changed how the world fights in the land force. If you take robotics, autonomy, AI, fully autonomous, fully robotic, I mean, all the things that are being put into our formations today, we are rapidly trying to take a look at what happened in Ukraine, what happened in Gaza, what happened other places around the world, to make sure that as this technology comes in, it's not just the tech itself, but how do you put it together so that we can still dominate in the future?
And sir, last question. Am I correct then in concluding that as we do that, as we go through this process, this learning, this preparing, this integrating, that it's going to require us to have an emphasis on both the thinking process and the executing process. That is to say that there's a role for what is now TRADOC and thinking through how we do this, but there's also a role for big spaces where we can move heavy equipment in cooperation with airspaces where we can operate small vehicles.
Absolutely, sir. And so the Chief started our initiative that I mentioned in my opening comments called the Transformation in Contact, where we infused this high tech across multiple platforms that are out there in volumes and in numbers that we probably would exceed in a normal environment, because we wanted to learn from those formations. At what point do you have too many unmanned systems before you can't employ them, or you are overwhelmed by the sensors that are out there? And we have been doing this now through train-ups in our combat training centers, so it's bottom-up. We're learning from them exactly how many UAVs do you put in a brigade formation, how many robots do you put in a formation, how many people do you need to analyze the information that's coming from those sensors that are out there. And it's easy in the Pentagon to look under white lights and we think it's 200, but it's much more impactful when you're hearing that from the troops on the ground.
Thank you, General. Thanks to each of the witnesses. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Tran, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, and to all our witnesses. Thank you so much for being here and for your service to this great country. General Mingus, my first question pertains to the pending decision to offload Army prepositioned stocks afloat in favor of a land-based location in the Indo-Pacific Theater. This decision marks a significant shift in our logistical posture and raises questions about the reliability of host nation support in a future contingency, especially given recent geopolitical developments. As you may be aware, Vietnam celebrated the fall of Saigon last week during a parade which featured Chinese PLA soldiers marching alongside their Vietnamese counterparts for the first time ever, a stark and symbolic signal for growing ideological and strategic alignment between the Socialist Republic of Vietnam and the People's Republic of China. In evaluating potential land-based alternatives to APS-3, how is the Army accounting for the political risks of stationing stocks in countries like Vietnam, particularly given its one-party communist system, geographic proximity to China, and the uncertainty of access rights in a conflict scenario?
Sir, we have not considered Vietnam. Right now, Australia and Philippines are the two principal locations. But when we began this journey, it started with those 7, 8 ships that we had for APS-3 were costing us in excess of $300 million a year. They were not loaded, combat configured, and so the offload time would have been when wherever they showed up, they would not have been ready to fight. It has also been my experience that unless an afloat APS is in the exact right spot when a crisis occurs, which we have a hard time predicting, you're generally not going to be in the right spot. And so we felt it much more effective, the acute threat, the #1 priority for our nation, that being China, that we download that, reset it, and put it aground in a place where it can be used effectively in a future fight.
Thank you. Appreciate that answer, General. My district is home to the Joint Forces Training Base Los Alamitos, which is strategically located in Southern California and well situated for joint training exercise by having significant aviation, logistics, and training infrastructure. Given current readiness challenges, including pilot shortages, logistics constraints, and budgetary pressures to maximize resources, I am concerned that the Joint Forces Training Base Los Al remains underutilized by active components in a tightening environment. Question for all the services. Understanding that JFTB Los Al falls under the California National Guard, are there any policy or procedural reasons that prevent your active components from incorporating this base into your logistics of training strategies under the current readiness strains? And if not, what are the specific reasons joint training bases like JFTB Los Al have not been more fully incorporated into planning frameworks?
So no policy issues that I'm aware of, but I will go back and find out just to make sure. And we do, from a whole Army concept, Guard, active, reserve, the vast majority of our logistics are in our reserve component. And so it's natural, and we do maximize the use of our reserve centers and our reserve mobilization centers, but I'll get a better answer for you after this.
Thank you, General. And the offer to train there goes to the other branches as well. I appreciate you all so much, and Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. And Mr. Carbajal, welcome back to HASC. Your presence and unique perspective has been sorely missed. So you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bergman and Ranking Member Garamendi, for the opportunity to join your subcommittee today. You know, Mr. Wilson was bragging about multi-service family that he was, and I'm proud that I'm a single-service family, all Marines, and equally proud. And also, as an enlisted Marine, I must say I used to hate hurry up and wait in the Marine Corps. So I'm extremely pleased to see a bunch of officers here doing a little bit of hurry up and wait as well. So just thought I'd share that with you. General Gutlein, I'm not normally on this readiness subcommittee, but I felt compelled to attend today and ask you about the ramifications of civilian workforce cuts on Space Force. As you are aware, I represent Vandenberg Space Force Base, an important location that supports key missions of the Space Force. I'm quite concerned about the impact of the executive orders, recent executive orders, to reduce the civilian workforce on Space Force readiness. Space Force is the connective fabric behind the joint force, and without dominance in space, there is no conflict we can win. Space Force's force structure is very different from other services in that you rely heavily on civilian personnel to carry out the mission. Often these are top performing and highly specialized individuals who could easily get hired in the private sector. I was alarmed to hear about the disproportionate impact the reductions will have on Space Force, with projections that you will lose over 13% of your civilian workforce. General Gutlein, can you briefly share with us how many civilians you employ and how many you have lost to each round of the deferred resignation program? And did you indeed lose 13% of your workforce?
Congressman, thank you for that question. As you know, the Space Force is the smallest force with the smallest budget with the largest AOR. So any personnel reductions in the United States Space Force hurt, especially these. We currently have 5,674 civilians. They make up about 1/3 of our entire total force. Of the deferred reduction programs, 223 took it in round one. Another 448 have taken it in round two, for a total of 671. When you combine those DRPs with the hiring freeze, the United States Space Force is down 13.7% in our civilian population.
Say that percentage again.
13.7.
Thank you. Why have so many civilians elected to leave the Space Force?
Congressman, some of them were to early retirement, as well as you called it out that the Space Force by its nature is a high-tech force, and these civilians can get jobs elsewhere. You couple that with the return to work and the quality of life. We tend to be in high-density areas like Los Angeles, and the quality of life means that these individuals are driving long distances, and they have chosen to take alternative career paths going forward.
What are some concrete examples of risks you are taking by losing hundreds of employees in a matter of months, especially considering there is a hiring freeze and you cannot backfill these positions?
Congressman, I think we have done pretty good at covering down on the risk, moving the forces around, working to become more efficient and more effective. We are seeing challenges in hiring in areas like child care and base operating support. And as you know, the Space Force employees in place, so we are heavily dependent on those core functions on our bases, and that is really where we are taking the risk, is in the infrastructure and the daily operations of our bases.
Thank you. And with my remaining time, I just wanted to congratulate you, General Mahoney, on being the only service, let me repeat that, the only service that has obtained a clean audit, which I hope the rest of the services can actually accomplish in the near future. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Carbajal. That, with the exception of my questions, will complete the first round. So I think Congressman Garamendi and I have agreed that we are both going to ask more questions in a second round. Congressman Schmidt, you good? Okay, General Gutlein. I'm familiar with the Space Force's new resilient GPS program, and I know Space Force understands its importance given how reliant our military is on space-based capabilities and the growing vulnerability of these systems to threats. The program is also a marquee example of how Space Force can work with new commercial space companies to deploy new capabilities faster and at lower cost. Can you tell me, how Space Force is working in this private sector, if you will, meld with military R&D? How is Space Force working with this new commercial space with these companies to rapidly counter the evolving threats posed by our adversaries?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. We are seeing more threat activity in space than we have seen before. It is becoming extremely contested. What is more troublesome is the behaviors that we are seeing from our adversaries are becoming the norms. We're seeing GPS spoofing, GPS jamming. We're seeing lasing of our ISR satellites. We're seeing shadowing of our national assets in space in a cat and mouse game. So it's become a very dangerous area. You couple that with the fact that we are the smallest service with the largest AOR, which means I cannot cover down with military capabilities across my entire domain. I have to partner. I have to partner with international. I have to partner with commercial and what we call hybrid architectures, which is the full integration and networking of commercial, allied, and DoD capabilities simultaneously. By building hybrid architectures, we're building out resilience through excess capacity, redundancy, and proliferation. We are drastically expanding our attack surface because they can no longer take out one of us, they have to take out all of us. So in that pursuit for resiliency and hybrid architectures, we are partnering with industry in ways we've never partnered before across any other domain. We are becoming fully interdependent upon each other in a very risk-based decision-making fashion. How much capability and capacity can I accept from commercial, and how much do I need to keep in reserve in our DoD? We're having those conscious conversations on a day-to-day basis. The really bright part of this future, though, is there's more innovation coming out of commercial than there ever has been in the past. So we are able to leapfrog our capabilities rapidly through these partnerships.
So what I heard you say was that compared to the other services, and you're the newest warfighter, if you will, as a service component. As you're establishing your capabilities to counter a truly rapidly changing, evolving threat, you have greater need for that involvement with the civilian sector now, as opposed to, let's say, if we're building a new airplane or a tank or whatever it happens to be, we have prototypes to work from, and we're going to change some things based on technology, based on the mission. But I hear you say you need to accomplish your mission. And if I'm misstating this, correct me, please. But you need that involvement of those outside the DoD resources, all the R&D that's happening within the civilian community, if you will, to space.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I know, Admiral Kilby, we talked a little bit about amphibs. And I think in your, last week, I think we talked thought I heard you say the Navy owes a 3-ship ARG amphibious ready group. I'll stay out of my old acronyms. That's ready to embark Marines and conduct a training cycle and deploy on schedule. How are we going to get there? And how are we going to get there where actually we're meeting the mission of the 3.0, whatever you want to call it, but we need those deployed Navy amphibious vessels with our Marines and sailors on board to be all over the world tomorrow. We need them there today, but we definitely need them there tomorrow. Any thoughts on the plan here?
Yeah, a couple things, sir. I made that comment specifically because I just want to step into the breach here and say we cannot have what happened on Boxer and Wasp happen again, right? Those two big amphibs, for different reasons, were delayed, and in one case, we sent a disaggregated ARG forward. That does a disservice to the MU. It does a disservice to the Marine Corps and the combatant commander who wants to use that asset. So that's really the genesis of why I said that, because I want to be just public about that. What we're doing about it is specifically looking within the surface domain. Each one of those, as you and I talked about at breakfast, submarine, surface, air, 80% combat surge ready. Within the surface domain, I want to look at this subset of amphibious ships because I want to make sure good performance at crew des level isn't washing out bad performance at the amphibious level. But we have to do a couple things. One, we have to be disciplined in our execution of planning and lock down that availability earlier. You weren't here, but I talked about doing open-ended specs earlier to inform the package to make sure I know what maintenance I need to do so I can buy that long lead material. I need to do some things differently. I need to do diesel maintenance in our CMAVs, which is outside of a major avail, so I can free up space, real estate on that ship to do maintenance around it. So I just need to be more creative and focus on the output here, which is making sure those ships are available to do that work. So we are at 61% combat surge ready across all ships today. That's not 80%, and I need to bring that water up to maintain both crew des and amphibs in a more effective manner. So I'm committed to do that.
Okay. I'm going to stop my first round right now and turn it over to Congressman Garamendi, and then I'll close it up when you're done, John.
Mr. Chairman, you were on a roll. I kind of hate to interrupt you. If you want to continue, I'm perfectly.
No, I needed a breath.
Well, I went and got coffee when you started, so I'm good to go. Gentlemen, thank you so very much. This is extremely important issues that we're dealing with here. I was listening to my colleagues, and they reminded me that all politics are local. I have no idea what's going on in the upper reaches of Michigan, but I do know that Travis Air Force Base, oh yes, there we are, General Spain, operates at about 60% of its potential capacity for lack of a taxiway. The county has made the property available to expand the taxiway. It could be done. It's not in the FIDEP. Why isn't it in the FIDEP? As near as I can tell, some of the munitions that were headed to Ukraine, as authorized by the White House and then stopped by the Secretary of Defense, were on planes that originated at Travis, stopped at Dover, where I think they're probably sitting now. But in any case, your attention to the taxiway issue, want to get it in the FIDEP, want to get that done so that the full capacity with the two runways that are going to be completed in the next couple of years, so we could do that. General Kilby, you and I have talked about the oldest Navy base on the west coast of America, Mare Island, shut down in BRAC. It is now operating, handling a few naval vessels, non-combat vessels, all to the good. It can be upgraded. There are 4 dry docks there. They can handle the DDG. I'm not going to take one of your aircraft carriers, but it is there. You talked about the repair problems in the Pacific and using our allies. That's good to a point. At some point, they have to come home, or they should come home. And so I'd like to talk to you about Mare Island and the Navy's short-term and then long-term use of the 4 dry docks at Mare Island, which I believe are the 4 plus 1. I think there's a floating dry dock in San Diego that's about to come online. So we'll talk about that. Now, having taken time to get to what's really important, my district, let's move on to some of these other things. General Mingus, you talked about combined forces. And I suppose that you were referring to your own forces and the various parts and pieces of that. I would expect that it also includes one or another of your colleagues at the table. Could you go into that a little bit more about the combined forces, and then if you'll pick up the Space Force issue as you talk about that?
Yes, sir. I mean, inside the Army, we have a term called combined arms maneuver, which takes all our warfighting functions and puts them together in a meaningful way, and you synchronize operations over time. It's fires and intel and protection and sustainment, and that's what we call. But when you go to joint combined arms maneuver, that's when we put the joint force together, and there's very little that any of us can do without the help of each other. I can't get anywhere without the Air Force or the Navy. As we think about the first and second island chain, there's going to, given the advent of some of our new long-range precision munitions we're going to be able to hold maritime targets at risk to help my shipmate here be able to get the fleet back in the first, second island chain. The Marines and us have to work together. They may have the initial punch, but there's this sustainment stuff that the Marines may look to us. And like I said, we can't get anywhere without the Air Force. And so the space is intertwined with all of that. We have a ton of ground control stations that we interoperate. Every one of our vehicles, every one of our humans, every one of our soldiers, they carry some kind of a location device that is reliant on space or communicate through space. And so position, navigation, and timing, communications, it goes on and on. There's nothing that the land force can't do without a space component that goes with it. So that's the power of the joint force.
Maybe one addition. To a greater extent than ever before that I remember, we are relying on each other to service each other's munitions. That's the Air Force and Space Force in particular, but airborne moving target indicator to take weapons that have flown out of the custody of my sensors is a place we're going to be more and more. So we've got to be able to work and train and execute together in a manner that is going to be completely reliant on the joint force.
I thought that you might go in that direction. And ultimately, none of it works if space doesn't work. So, and we need to have a long conversation about that, and I'm sure the other subcommittees are also, how that interaction. As you were talking about weapons, I was just looking at the early bird briefing, and the Ukrainians took a Sidewinder missile, put it on some floating drone, and shot down. I see some smiles. Now, how the hell they do that? That's the kind of innovation that that I hope we're seeing in all of your work. I won't ask you. That's probably over a cup of coffee in the morning to talk about how they did that. I'm curious. Now, all of you are also developing your own space assets. How does that integrate with Space Force's assets? And the ultimate question, why are you doing that, and why are you not depending on Space Force?
Staying at the classification levels that we need.
Well, then let's not go there. Just let that question hang there, and I'll catch you down the road a piece. Okay?
Yes, sir.
And I think that applies to, it applies to all of you. And so the integration of these systems and Space Force. We'll let it stop right there. Where do I want to go next? Did you get your deep breath? You got your breath back? I'm ready. Take a run at it, and I'll come back at it.
Now, I say this seriously and with great respect for my colleague. You know, he is, John, you are a few months older than I am, and we're the two old dogs up here. So that's what you get when you have people who have been around a long time and served in many different capacities. So I appreciate you bearing with us, as sometimes we'll ask questions that may not seem on point, but we talk a lot outside of the hearing room and are mutually locked at the hip when it comes to, number one, be ready to fight, but also be ready to win. Readiness, I would suggest to you, also means that you all, each service, have some level of prioritized surge capability in a non-classified scenario. And if we need to take this classified at a future date to really get into it, what are the current major inhibitors to each of your services' ability to surge? If you needed to fly things, float things, drive things, whatever it is tonight, are there anything that you would want us to know that are inhibitors, again, in an unclassified way? You could say very simply, people, I don't have enough sailors to man my ships. I don't have enough, maintainers to maintain the tanks, whatever it is. General Mingus, you want to enlighten us a little bit what you think?
We are moving in the right direction here, but the principal driver of readiness across the Army for the last year to two has been the people. Our structure, in other words, the number of flags that we have across the Army would call for an end strength of about 473,000. Our end strength today is 449,000. We will end the year, I think, at about 452,000, and we are on a path to continue to grow that in the next couple of years. So that, as I talked about in the beginning, do we change our structure or do we continue to grow our end strength? But very closely behind that, though, is our equipment readiness, which we saw a bit of a bathtub over the last year. And a couple of things that culminated. One was the cascading of some of our heavy formations from the active to the guard, which created some turbulence in the supply chain. And then the platforms that we gave to Ukraine and the resupply parts that we were pushing over there did dry up some of our supply chain and supply parts that were out there. Our Army Material Command and our sustainment enterprise has completely flipped that on its head. And I'd love to come and have them brief you on what we call Weapons 360. The complete automation using large language models and advanced artificial intelligence tools that's able to now look at the last 5 to 10 years worth of demand history across every one of those supply chains and much more precisely and accurately figure out what we need to sustain 2 armor brigade combat teams in Europe for the next 9 months, to be able to have that stuff pre-ordered ahead of time, to be able to anticipate and be ahead of the game in terms of what those are. So I guess that's the other piece. Even after we fix the problem, we're going to have to fix the supply chain side of things as well.
Thank you. Admiral Kilby?
Hey, a couple things, sir. One, maintenance completion on time. That's why we have an 80% combat surge ready goal. So if we can get our maintenance on time, we'll have more ships available. Manning's a piece of this too. So like everyone has testified, we're all working hard on recruiting. I'm going to exceed my goal this year, but I need to do that for a couple of years to buy down on the 23,000 gaps at sea. It takes 9 months to get a sailor from boot camp to the ship, so I've got to continue on that path to get my ships manned at where they need to be. Spare parts. I need to continue to buy OPN 8 and APN 6 parts for my aircraft and ships so I don't cannibalize from other ships to get a ship underway, and that just creates a problem for me. So I need the right amount of spares so I can get that done. I need to continue to invest in things like additive manufacturing that make a part in 19 days instead of 40 weeks so I can unleash the burden of our ships. And finally, one investment which is a little bit hidden is this thing called live virtual constructive training. So the ability to do training at sea at numbers that I think the adversary is going to throw at me is super important for tactics, techniques, and procedures, proficiency, and currency maintenance. So that's an investment I appreciate your continued support on.
General Mahoney.
Sir, thanks. And I think and this is not a cop-out answer, it would depend on the duration and the capabilities required to surge. If it is a system-heavy surge, we're going to run out of components for that system, the system itself, and spare parts for the system. Let me give you an example. If we had to surge aviation right now, as you know, the F-35 is not where we need it to go. We would run out of machines before we ran out of ordnance and people to man those machines. Conversely, if it was a more manpower-intensive requirement, if it was an infantry unit, we are likely to run out of the people to surge over time than we would the equipment that they require in all cases. I think if surge connotes expending ordnance, expending ordnance systems, we will run out of those in all cases. So if the bumper sticker is depth of magazine equals people, equals systems, equals ordnance and ordnance systems. You can't just take one or the other. Depth of magazine is defined by all of that.
Thank you. General Spain.
Sir, thanks. Nothing really new to add. The sustainment tail for us is critical. If you get into a protracted conflict, the ability to get parts, supplies, support equipment at the numbers required to sustain a fight over time, as at the scale that we've seen in Europe, we would be stressed to make that happen, no doubt. Eventually, people could be a problem, but that's not the critical problem from our warfighting units at this point. And then generically, procurement of critical munitions at the scale required is also a shortfall that we would continue to ask for help on from the Congress.
Okay. Thank you. General Gutlein.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have a completely different problem. We're your newest service, we are your leanest service, and we are in a build-up phase. So when you ask me, what do I need to surge? I need everything. I need people, I need equipment, I need it all. We are 9,500 strong. We've got to at least double that to meet the demand of our nation and our warfighters today. Going forward, we need more counter space kit, which is the ability to protect blue and deny red. How do I deny our adversaries' use of space and adversaries' ability to counter us? I need more space domain awareness, which means I need to understand what's going on in the space domain. I need to understand what our adversaries are up to and what their intent is. And finally, I need more C2 and more communications to round out and use the capabilities that we need. So we are building up from scratch, and we don't have a lot of surge capability. If we went to war today, we would do it on the backs of our people, and our Guardians are absolutely dedicated to doing the mission.
Thank you. And I want to just, again, because I asked you the question before about your interaction with those civilian companies that are in this new space. Is there, are we optimally engaging with them, or, and not, I don't want you to dime out any entities in the Pentagon, but are there any bureaucratic obstacles to you getting the access to the interaction with those companies? Are you being, do you have free access to go out and talk to people?
Chairman, we have had more dialogue and more access to commercial at any time in my 34 years in the United States Air Force and the United States Space Force. The dialogue we are having is more robust than ever. We are having reverse industry days, which means I have industry come hear what my problems are in a non-threatening environment where I protect their IP, and they pitch back to me what they think they can do to help me solve my problems in an open dialogue manner. We published our commercial space strategy last April that talks about how we're going to partner with industry going forward. And this year we started putting on contract our commercially augmented space reserve contracts to buy us capacity during times of crisis or conflict that we can't necessarily afford during times of peace. So it has been a very robust conversation. The challenges that you're talking about, there are some legal challenges they're working on. We're going against some policy challenges, and we're especially going against cultural challenges.
Let's have a future one thing is policy, because you got law and you got policy. Law, you either pass a law or, rescind it. Policy is, good policy gives you on-ramps and off-ramps. So let's talk more about the policies that will enable Space Force, but all of you, but especially Space Force, because you're still, if you will, you're right in your future here, having not had to necessarily deploy it yet and see how it works.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Davis, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. Let me be clear, bases like Seymour Johnson Air Force Base located in my district have been, in my opinion, neglected despite hosting 2 F-15E combat squadrons to deploy and do some really important work to secure the Middle East as well as the American people. To ensure Strike Eagles, which provide the most avionics and payload capabilities of any fighter, remain ready, there are many opportunities to decouple flying hours from maintenance dollars. But what I would like to do is, if we could, General Spain, would like to understand the commitment of the Air Force. Is the plan still with the F-15Es and Lake and Heath? Where are those to go? My understanding was Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and I just want to reaffirm that that's the case.
Thanks, Representative Davis. Appreciate the question. The current plan has not changed for the Air Force. Certainly, we intend to continue to prioritize Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and we intend to comply fully with the NDA language that keeps the older F-15E with 220 engines around based on that language. The discussion about where the Lake and Heath aircraft go, some of them certainly were intended to go to Seymour Johnson, and there's still discussions about the distribution, the full distribution, based on now retaining the 220 F-15Es that we already have at Seymour Johnson.
Are there or have there been any conversations, to your knowledge, not to send any of those aircraft to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base?
No, sir. The dialogues continued about the distribution based on retaining F-15Es at Seymour that originally we had discussed divesting. And so we're continuing to have that dialogue internally, and we'll certainly continue to have that with the Congress.
And General Spain, as we look at the reconciliation package that went through Armed Services, $127 million in particular allocated for maintenance and upgrade for F-15E retirements to prevent the retirements. Are you aware of those dollars going to any other locations or any other locations that would secure those dollars other than Seymour Johnson Air Force Base?
Not specifically, sir. I'll take that question for the record on the details of exactly where those dollars are going, but undoubtedly, if they're earmarked for F-15Es, then some portion of that will go to Seymour Johnson.
Thank you. General, you also mentioned the importance of remaining in compliance with the NDAA language. My understanding, the language that we approved basically solidified the strategic basing plan. What are your thoughts then of the recent decision to announce F-15EXs at Selfridge? Is that consistent with the strategic basing plan?
Well, sir, as you know, that's a presidential action and an order to move F-15EXs to Selfridge. So that's outside of the Department of the Air Force's strategic basing plan. We intend to continue to work the strategic basing plan for internal decisions, but we also fully intend to comply with the order that was given.
What is the impact then when such decisions are made outside of the strategic basing plan? How does it impact the work that you're doing in the Air Force?
It depends on the details of the actual order, which we're waiting on in this case. But for now, we don't really know the exact impacts while we're waiting on the specific language.
So we don't know the exact impact, but if I then reach out and I could, by way of this question right now, ask the President, the Commander-in-Chief, if you can make an announcement for Seymour Johnson. Then if other members begin to do the same thing, do you believe there would eventually be an impact?
Any decision made at that level can certainly have impacts, if not associated with the corresponding funds to execute the decision, and could potentially disrupt previous plans. In this case, we just simply don't know the details of that decision.
And my last question in the 7 seconds here, what's the implications of the cost to now retrofit Selfridge to accommodate this platform, the F-15EX?
We're still working through the cost. Certainly, there will be MILCON associated with the move from A-10s to F-15EXs as a very different platform going into that base. So there will be additional costs, and we'll certainly get the specific number back to you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Garamendi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you correctly instructed me that these gentlemen have been very generous with their time and their work, and therefore I will only ask them about an hour and a half of questions. No, I'll try to keep it much shorter than that. Mr. Chairman, you raised the issue of surge. there's a very, very real problem surging in the Pacific, and that's transport across the Pacific. It has not yet been dealt with. We've been wrestling with this on this committee and in the larger committee for a better part of at least 7 or 8 years. I want to bring to your attention a couple of opportunities that do exist. First of all, in the SHIPS Act, which was introduced last week, and it would create the opportunity to build transport vessels of many different kinds in the United States, as well as enhance and improve our non-government naval bases, non-Navy. So I draw that to your attention. I would appreciate your comments. I can somehow weave this into space, and I'm sure I can weave it into the Air Force, but the other three of you, it's most definitely your turf in addressing the issue of surge capacity. Essentially, the SHIPS Act is designed to rebuild our merchant marine, both in terms of personnel and capability of building ships. I will not go in great detail, although I've got about 20 specific questions for each of you on it, which I will ask later after you have a chance to review it. I think you'll find it to be solutions for some of the issues that you're facing. The second area, I'll make this also short, really has to do with the research agenda. The research agenda across the government is being significantly reduced by the administration. And there's reason to believe that it is being reduced in the Department of Defense also. And I suspect the research agenda is on virtually everything we've talked about here and some things we've not yet talked about. So as you go back, I would appreciate hearing from you about critical research that enables you to carry out your your plans for the future. And I would suggest that you will find support for those research programs here. And I can probably come up with a list of half a dozen without too much trouble, and you could probably expand on tripling that. So please take a look at those research dollars that you've been depending on. We want to make sure that they're still there. And I'm sure it goes everything from healthcare to PTSD and all the electrical systems that you deal with. I want to also put on the agenda, I've taken too many notes for a moment. Oh, no longer in my district, General Spain, is Beale Air Force Base. A decision was made that the CCA, Collaborative Combat Airframes, would be at least partially or perhaps even more so at Beale Air Force Base. It's a good choice. Having represented that for the previous 10 years, they continue to bang on my door. And not the Air Force, the support people, civilian support. And I would like to have some more detail about what and how much. Okay, you were talking about that a moment ago. Let's see here. Can I shuffle through the notes? Guam, dry docks on the West Coast. With regard to the Navy, using our allies' maritime facilities, dry docks, et cetera, is all good. But nonetheless, there's a balance here about bringing it home and doing some of the heavy work, the long-term work here. Otherwise, you're going to have your personnel sitting on some dock someplace, wondering what are they going to do there for the next year, whatever that availability is going to be. So a little thought about that and how you would use the West Coast facilities. Did I mention Mare Island? I think I did earlier. Space capabilities, we'll deal with that later. The training issues. I was talking to one of our colleagues offline here a moment ago. the training facilities that you have available, particularly the Army and the Air Force, and I think similarly the Marine Corps, perhaps a little less, is now, General, I want to get General Mingus the right word here, combined arms in which basically all of you are involved at those training facilities. I'm not sure how the Navy fits into this, but I suspect it does in some way. How we maintain and protect those training facilities becomes an important part of this committee's work. We've been dealing with this in great detail, basically in Nevada. But there's much more, and there are many other places also. We talked a little bit about Hawaii here a few moments ago. We will need more specificity on how your, General Mingus, specifically for you, and I guess this will go to Air Force and Space Force also, how the combined work that you will have to do to carry out your new ATI, how that fits, and the training facilities that you need and where you're going to use them. I'm thinking specifically about the Air Force and the Navy in Nevada. Will you be using those in some way, and if so, how? And similarly, insofar as this is applicable to the Marine Corps, I would like to see us get a pretty good fix on what is going to be needed, as really all of you are transitioning to a different modality of dealing with the issues that you have. What do you need for your training facilities? Where? What needs to be protected? What is at risk? So that we can go round and round on this as we did in the previous couple of years, specifically in Nevada. Let's see, I keep finding this Travis and Mare Island at the top of my list. I'll put it at the bottom. The issue of continuing resolutions. The appropriations for the current year are not over. We saw some of that in the reconciliation issue. I just know we're going to see more of it in the days and months ahead. We're going to need to understand how you are maneuvering. I would be shocked to find that you're not, so I assume that you are maneuvering to deal with the absolutely must-do, cannot survive without. It would be helpful to us to have some specificity as we look at the remaining, what it would be Christmas before we actually finish the NDAA and maybe even the appropriations. So over the next 6 months or so, this issue is going to come back to us. And to the extent that we have some heads up, and it's really critical, can't survive without this or that, money for this or that, it would be helpful to know ahead of time. I think I'm going to go back to where I started. General Mingus, this is specifically for you. I asked this question, and it really applies across to all of you, and that is you are changing. And General Mingus, you have the biggest, at least currently known change. I suspect the others of you are similarly looking at significant change. I want to know a sustainment plan for each and every piece of that change. I don't want to sit here another 10 years, which I probably won't be able to do anyway, but I'm good for the next 6 years. You can count on that. And I want to know in your change, General Mingus, I'll just use you as an example. I know the others are doing some things similarly in big time changes. I want to know your sustainment plan. I don't want to ever get caught up as we did with the F-35, and it's 20 years later, and oh my, where's the depot? And I can go into the Navy and shipyards and so on and so forth. I won't. But the sustainment issue is incredibly important. And I want to finally compliment, I'm trying to figure out which one of you said resiliency 5 times over. I hope you don't get in trouble. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And number one, thank you to all of you for your preparation. for this hearing, because it can be broad-ranging. I would suggest to you that the next time we get together, it will be classified. Probably not too in the distant future, so we'll shape this up, because we'll talk about the readiness in that classified setting, and it'll probably be sooner rather than later. There is no better deterrent than readiness, because if we're ready to fight, our adversaries will know that, and it will deter them. But we have to be prepared to fight, and fight in depth. And I guess as Congressman Garamendi said, and I would echo this, as you're changing, whatever it is you're changing, that sustainment plan for that change as you implement. It's almost the difference between transition between legacy and next gen of whatever it is you're doing, and stopping where you need to stop and sustaining the future. And I think might help. Well, we're not going to, this is not going to be a mission that's assigned today, but we as the United States government, especially the Department of Defense, and this is not service specific, we need to be able to pass an audit, okay? It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but we do have to pass it, because that drives, in the end, the readiness in so many ways that we're still doing things that we need to stop doing, but we have not figured out how to stop doing them and account for that, and then redirect those resources elsewhere. That's change management. So, you guys got a lot on your plate, and you got partners over here. So with that, I appreciate your time, I appreciate your patience and all your preparation, and this hearing is adjourned.
Tactical Air and Land Forces of the House Armed Services Committee is hereby called to order. We'll begin our efforts by opening remarks from the chair and the ranking member. In the interest of time, in the interest of getting to the testimony from our witnesses and questions, I'm going to dispense with my opening remarks, have them entered into the record. And with that, I yield to Mr. Courtney.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to do likewise. But again, just for the record, just want to note that I'm just sort of pinch hitting here today for Congressman Norcross, who's on the mend. Yes. From his setback. He is watching. He texted me this morning to say that he's following this on streaming TV, and has read all the materials, and this is I think on day one going to be ready to go in terms of picking up where he left off. Fantastic. And again, I want to just thank the witnesses for being here, and with that, I'll yield back.
Very good. Well, thanks, Joe. And Don, if you're watching, we'll hope you get better soon, and we promise that we will carry on in your stead. So with that, let's go ahead and begin with Director Beck and his testimony. Director Beck, all yours.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Courtney, and we send our best wishes for a speedy recovery to Ranking Member Norcross. Members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee today, and for all Congress has done to put DIU in a position to help make a difference. At DIU, we're focused on working with our teammates across the department to deliver the very best commercially derived technology with the focus, speed, and scale needed to deter major conflict or win if forced to fight. Nowhere is this imperative clearer than in the case of increasingly agile, lethal, and autonomous unmanned systems. In Ukraine this past December, I had the opportunity to see firsthand the eye-watering pace of change in UAS and counter-UAS technologies and the tactics, techniques, and procedures employed at the front line in an underground unit spread throughout Kyiv, all evolving constantly in a life-and-death struggle of innovation and counter-innovation. The resulting demand is supported by an incredibly dynamic ecosystem of hardware and software providers who are rising and competing to meet the challenge. DIU is embedded with the Security Assistance Group Ukraine to help capture these lessons for both offense and defense, and then apply them to our own critical needs globally. But we must do far more. The required pace of change and scale is something the commercial tech sector that I come from, fueled by constant and fiercely competitive updates, would find daunting. For the government's traditional approach to defense budgeting, procurement, testing, and fielding, it is simply unattainable. On offense, we must take advantage of the best emerging tech to put our joint force in a position to defeat our adversaries and to overcome their rapidly evolving counter-UAS capabilities. On defense, we must meet the exponentially growing challenge from ever more capable drone attacks and stop being forced to shoot down drones that cost a few $100s with multi-million-dollar weapons that are hard to produce and even harder to replenish. We must do this now, and we must do this at scale. This is what DIU is focused on helping all of us to execute. First, in partnership with the services, we're helping put concrete UAS capabilities in place where warfighters need it most. In just one example, we partnered with the Army on company-level small UAS using the agile funding that Congress has authorized to enable them to prototype and actually deploy this capability in just 6 months. We're now working with the Army to accelerate in fiscal year 25 while they work to ensure scaling in future years. Together, we're bridging the valley of death and delivering warfighter impact and also delivering a successful reference case for private sector investment. Second, DIU's leverage its commercial relationships and its commercial solutions opening process to extend critical enabling command and control, automatic target recognition, and collaborative autonomy capabilities, as well as the ability to update them constantly as the technology and needs evolve. Third, DIU is working to catalyze the defense industrial base through the Blue UAS initiative. Blue UAS provides a continuous approach to rapidly prototyping and scaling capable and secure commercially derived UAS tech for DoD without Chinese parts or Chinese money. To meet the need for dramatically greater scale, DIU is now overhauling Blue UAS from the ground up to rapidly vet a much broader set of UAS platforms and components at speed and year-round. Finally, DIU is working to help our commercial partners scale to meet the department's growing demand. Earlier this month, DIU announced the Blue Manufacturing Initiative, which pairs defense tech hardware and software companies with the very best advanced manufacturing providers right here in the United States to help enable the scale we need. I'm happy to discuss this and our Blue UAS revamp more during questions. Turning to defense, DIU's primary role is again to work with teammates across the department to put advanced counter-UAS capability into the field fast. DIU is also driving Replicator 2, a whole-of-department and interagency effort to improve counter-small UAS protection for critical assets, largely centered on the homeland. Across all counter-UAS efforts, DIU is focused on leveraging the best commercially derived technology to accelerate our warfighters' ability to sense, decide, and act under incredible complexity from combat environments overseas to population centers here at home. For example, we're working with Northcom and the services to defend homeland military sites and installations, including with low-cost sensing, flyaway kits, and low-collateral solutions for site defense. In conclusion, the DoD team is already addressing the rapidly transforming arena of unmanned and counter-unmanned technologies and the enormous challenges and opportunities it presents that require us to bring the very best American innovation to bear. DIU is at the heart of these efforts with our partners across the department, many of whom are sitting with me today, but we need to be doing much, much more. We must put capability in place now. We must dramatically improve our capacity and speed to update unmanned and counter-unmanned technologies, and we must build the muscle to do so in greater and greater scale. To do this, we need your support to ensure sufficient authorities and resources are in place to help develop solutions and scale up production capacity. We can't take tenuous or incremental steps here. We need to take bold leaps, and we need your help to do so. We'll also need your help in changing our collective culture surrounding risk. We must be willing to take the right kinds of risk today to avoid taking unacceptable risk to mission, risk to force, and strategic risk for our nation due to our inability to meet the threat because we move too slowly. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Director Beck, thank you. Very sage advice. We will now go to Lieutenant General Eric Austin, United States Marine Corps. Lieutenant General Austin, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chairman Whitman, Representative Courtney, distinguished members of this subcommittee. I'd like to echo Mr. Beck's well wishes to Representative Norcross for a speedy recovery. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm honored to represent your Marine Corps, and I look forward to discussing our efforts to address the growing threats and opportunities posed by small unmanned aerial systems. The Marine Corps continues to responsibly and necessarily modernize our force in the context of a dynamic and rapidly changing character of warfare aligned with our strategic guidance and in concert with our sister services. Guided by our Commandant's priorities, we're balancing our role as the nation's force and readiness with our aggressive effort to modernize, which certainly includes integration of small unmanned aerial systems and integration of systems to counter threat unmanned aerial systems. Our mission is clear. To equip Marines with the tools to dominate in a contested environment while providing active and passive capabilities, necessary training, and other solutions to protect them from an increasingly complex and capable threat. Through a rigorous campaign of learning informed by lessons from current conflicts, we're adapting to a battlefield, in many cases redefined by small UAS. The Marine Corps is fielding unmanned aerial systems like the Skydio X-2D, the Skyraider R-80 Delta, the Stalker, at the battalion level and below. We're experimenting with low-cost, attritable drones using first-person view guidance methods to provide additional lethality organic to the Marine Air Ground Task Force. To this point, just this year, in a response to the observed evolution of armed FPV drone technology and tactics today on the battlefield, we established the Marine Corps Attack Drone Team. And this team is tasked to rapidly integrate lessons from modern combat, refine service-level requirements, and to train our Marines through a competition in arms program to increase and inform our organic lethality. Just last Friday, they completed their first test firing of a first-person view drone armed with a high-explosive charge on a Quantico range complex. It's exciting, and this construct is really working. Though we fielded hundreds of small UAS and related capabilities, we have work to do. We must pursue faster and cheaper solutions. We are also fielding a portfolio of force protection capabilities to counter the UAS threat. We fielded the first of our Marine Air Defense Integrated System, or MADIS, systems to 3 Marine Expeditionary Force and a prototype light variant of the same capability to all 3 of our Marine Expeditionary Forces. The latter is principally designed to support our Marine Expeditionary units. These capabilities tie into our command and control systems and can detect and defeat small UAS and other threats via both non-kinetic and kinetic means. The 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment today is campaigning forward in Bala-Katan and exercising the MADIS system as we sit here today. This fiscal year, we will also field a prototype counter-UAS capability to protect dismounted Marines. This initiative will put man-portable solutions into Marines' hands at the tactical edge. We are feverishly working and believe this will be a model for fielding and iterative improvement. We've developed an installation counter-UAS system to detect and defeat low-altitude UAS threats and protect our bases and stations. We've fielded initial installations counter-UAS equipment sets and will incrementally expand this critical capability to protect 34 sites starting this fiscal year. We've also identified a relocatable fixed-site solution that we're integrating into our formations as part of our portfolio approach to counter small UAS. Despite these successes, challenges loom large. The relentless pace of technological change and adversary innovation demands we accelerate. We must go faster. We must rapidly learn, iterate, improve, adapt, and modernize. We must continue modernizing how we modernize the Marine Corps. And to that end, beyond strictly material solutions, we've established a mechanism to increase the velocity of our acquisition processes for key capabilities, the Marine Corps Fusion Center, which is located in Quantico, Virginia. It's designed to drive necessary and healthy cross-functional approach that combines experts from our science and technology requirements and acquisition teams to collapse the timeline from concept to fielded capability, combined with the ability to work at a high security construct. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, this is a team sport, and we all must move faster. To this end, we're collaborating closely with the Defense Innovation Unit, the Joint Counter Small UAS Aircraft Systems Office, and our other sister services, certainly to include the Army. Your continued support and advocacy are valued and appreciated and central to our success. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
Lieutenant General Austin, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Now we will go to Lieutenant General Robert Collins, United States Army.
Chairman Whitman, Congressman Courtney, and I'd also give a shout out to our ranking member. Our thoughts and prayers are with you for a rapid recovery, and to members of the HASC subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to come out and to discuss our unmanned aerial system and counter small UAS modernization efforts, and I would say also our collaboration across this team of experts that I'm joined here. I would say first and foremost, we fully acknowledge the threat and the proliferation of these systems, both abroad and at home. And we collectively as a team are acting with urgency. We are generating momentum, and we are aggressively pressing ahead. We have observed these activities, as mentioned, from Ukraine to the Middle East and also here in the homeland. We have lessons learned and taking those, making them applied as we learn about increasing speeds, altitudes, stealth, how they operate in contested environments, distance, all of those things that we need to take immediate action. And I would say in one particular instance here in the homeland, for example, at Picatinny, when we had that incident on the 12th of December, We were able to take immediate action, and within about a 48-hour period, we were able to put kit on the ground to be able to put that in place to take action and protect that critical infrastructure. I would say first on the how, we certainly are adapting the how of how we more quickly iterate, how we scale, the speed, and how we outpace our threat and we insert emerging technologies. A couple areas that we're looking at is changing our buying models. And I would say we're doing that through adopting commercial off-the-shelf technologies, working through agile funding to give us additional flexibility, one. Two, increasing our modularity and openness of how we do these particular areas as we attract and desire to attract some of the non-traditionals. Increasing the competition as we do these iterative and tranche buys to make sure that we get the best of breed of capability. Focusing on software-centric and autonomous capable systems, and also bending the cost curve as we scale up and making sure we're pairing the right intercept and defeat mechanism with the right target and threat. And we are certainly thankful for all the authorities and the tools that Congress has been able, has allowed us and enabled us to be able to accomplish this. On the what, I would say there is likely no single silver bullet, nor can we hyper-specialize on some of these areas, and we need a layered approach to be able to get after this. And that ranges everything from soldier common capability to things that may require a military occupational specialty for higher complex threats and capabilities and systems. We're shaping that I would say in a couple areas. One, more flexible requirements where we describe what it is that we want industry to provide versus overly prescribe and use continuous iterations with soldiers to inform. I would say also we have soldiers and users actively involved in the process so we can get their feedback and do so through experimentation in realistic conditions. And overall, I think this helps from material to training to employment. On UAS, the layered strategy from Group 1 down at platoon level through our Group 2, our medium range, all the way up to our longer ranges at battalion and brigade. Couple that with modular packages that can do anything from intel comms, electronic warfare, all of which we can do so without putting soldiers at risk. On Counter-UAS, also continuing to modernize capabilities, not only through operational fixed sites for some of our operational units, as well as the soldier common kit and supporting operations in the homeland and focusing in on that sense, that decide, the ability that we need to do so and pair those weapon systems, and also intercept from non-kinetic, kinetic, and even at the homeland, low collateral capability given some of the urban environments. And finally, I would just collectively underscore it's imperative to keep pace with this and to continue to operate speed that we operate as a team, both with the Department of Defense. We've done great things with the DIU, with our joint services, and certainly with industry to share those best practices, insights, and a partner across many efforts. And I thank you very much for your continued support for your members and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Sorry, Major General David Stewart. There we go. Trying to change your name.
Chairman Whitman, Congressman Courtney, distinguished members of the subcommittee, and of course, best wishes to Ranking Member Norcross. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss counter-small UAS, gaps, requirements, and projected capabilities. I serve as the director of the Joint Counter-UAS Office, or JCO, the DoD's executive agent for countering Groups 1, 2, and 3 UAS. The small UAS threat is present and constantly evolving. Conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine demonstrate how advances in hardware, software, and tactics are making drones more autonomous, easily acquired, and deadlier. Compared to the IEDs that killed and injured thousands of American service members, UAS are more dangerous because they actively surveil, target, and deliver lethal effects from the air. Importantly, this threat is not just in operational environments abroad. Small UAS are becoming more prevalent here in the homeland. The JCO leads and synchronizes joint requirements, technologies, training, and doctrine to minimize duplication and redundancy. We are the connective tissue of the DoD, working daily across the department and interagency with industry, allies, and partners on all things counter-small UAS. The JCO assesses urgent capability gaps and accelerates materiel development to our warfighters and enhance their lethality, funding an enhanced common operating picture, investing in continued development of a cost-efficient counter-small UAS effector, and transitioning multiple systems to the services. The JCO has also funded operational assessments to multiple combatant commands to get kit in warfighters' hands and simultaneously inform future service rapid acquisition decisions. We continue to invest in future technologies like low collateral effectors, high-powered microwave, and directed energy. To further inform service acquisition decisions and accelerate future system development, the JCO hosts instrumented demonstrations where our industry partners showcase capabilities and we invest in promising service-led RDT&E efforts. Beyond materiel, the JCO executes rapid response teams to combatant commands, providing expertise on system emplacement and operations. We funded the creation and further development of the DoD's only Joint Counter-UAS University and online modules to build doctrinal and training foundations. We also contributed to the DoD's Counter-UXS strategy and assist with policy development. Lastly, there is no silver bullet. The breadth of this threat requires a layered systems of systems approach. With your continued support, we aim to move faster for our warfighters and government-wide stakeholders to outpace this threat at home and abroad. Thank you.
Thank you, Major General Stewart. I appreciate the testimony of our witnesses, and we will now proceed to questions. Let me start by asking the entire panel this question. Where we see ourselves today is in the middle of a significant threat by unmanned aerial systems, small and otherwise. Most of what we've seen is small. We've seen incursions at places like Joint Base Langley-Eustis, at Picatinny Arsenal. Those things should concern us deeply. As I have gone and gotten the briefs on these threats, it's very clear to me that this is more than just a hobbyist that mistakenly flew a drone over a U.S. military facility. This is purposeful. It's meant to not just gain information, which much of it can be gained by other sources, but it's meant to probe. It's meant to determine what is the reaction of the United States, what capabilities do they have, and how will they act, and then how can our adversaries counter that if they did choose to do something. To me, that's very, very problematic. Major General Stewart, I want to ask you, if there was a major incursion tonight at a United States military base, what would the response be? You talk about having kit. Is there kit at these bases? Is there a kit that's in a mobile unit that can go? What would we do? How would we respond? How would we do things in a way, too, that not only eliminates the threat, but I think as importantly, gives us the opportunity to gain intelligence on the source of that threat, the capability of that threat. You know, it's one thing to completely kinetically destroy something, but it's another thing to be able to take it out, to take the threat away, but also to recover enough information to where we can take another step forward in our countermeasures. So how do we do that, and how do we take lessons learned at Langley, especially where, in my mind, there was a complete breakdown in decision making. I felt bad for the base commander there who said, hey, I want to be able to act. This platform was there for over 45 days, repeatedly. There were, unfortunately, responses we had to make in relation to that. As his base commander asked people above him, they said, oh, don't worry about it. You have the authorities. If you think it's an imminent threat, then you can use them. And he said, that's not the question I'm asking. I'm asking, if I use that authority, will you back me? Nobody above him would say that. They'd say, oh, you have the authorities, you can do it. So here you have an 06 at a base that's 18 months away from retirement and is trying to make sure he's doing the right thing, but is not quite confident that the folks above him have his back. And then when we asked the folks from the Pentagon to come in and give us their assessment of that, we got a nice long assessment that was word salad And then when I asked, well, what's the Pentagon's response going to be? Pentagon says, well, we're going to impanel a work group. My head exploded. So I want to know, sans impaneling a work group, how are we going to address this? I understand the cross-jurisdictional issues. I think the authorities are clear in what the United States military has. I understand concerns by FAA, FCC, all of those different entities, but I would argue that the protection of our men and women in uniform and those facilities are job one, and that should be the priority. So Major General Stewart, I know I've given a lot of background there, but I want to get your perspective on where would we be today if the same thing happened today at Langley or Picatinny? What would our response be, and could we act immediately to counter that and to gather the necessary information to make sure we're learning about the nature of this threat?
Each service and each installation will have different circumstances based mostly on the threat. And what we're finding with the threat is there are multiple ways to navigate, whether that's using radio frequency uplink, downlink, using waypoints through satellites, or loading optics in to use the terrain to fly. We're now even seeing tethered. So back to the point that there is no one silver bullet. There's no one single way to detect these different threats. So you need a system of a systems approach, for sure. Each service will look at the individual installations and the requirements that are required for capability. But beyond materiel, you point out some very good observations that training is essential, regularly rehearsed battle drills, and just really understanding policy, which the JCO has produced videos to help installation commanders understand their authorities. And then lastly, I would just say, I believe and assess that the capability is there. We have a bit of a capacity problem across each one of the services at installations, but each service is prioritizing installations based on maybe critical infrastructure as well. And lastly, I know the Northcom commander is looking for flyaway kits.
I think that's critical. It'd be great if you could provide for the subcommittee an inventory of kit that's in place on these bases. I understand each service branch is responsible for their base. And then I think mobile kit is critical too for maybe bases that don't have quite as high a level of threat, but if something's there, you know, we can mobilize kit within 12 hours and have it on site to do both sensing and efforts to be able to neutralize these efforts. So if you could give us current assessment of that, that would be great. I want to now go to my colleague, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beck, in your testimony, and actually on page 3, you actually spelled it out in writing about the fact that the traditional approach to defense procurement, testing, and fielding is simply unattainable. That's why DOD, with support from Congress, must reinforce progress made over the last few years. You know, as I think every member knows in the committee, Chairman Rogers and Mr. Smith, ranking member, are very focused in terms of this year's NDAA in terms of acquisition reform. I mean, is there specific ways that we can help solve this issue of traditional procurement obstacles?
So I would love to spend the next 40 minutes and the next day talking about that because the energy and passion that I've got and that we've all got about getting after that is so enormous. I guess maybe to kind of just hit a couple of points really quickly. First, I think you got to, you know, if you look at the world and the way that we operate this whole kind of defense procurement universe, we have the most dynamic market economy in the world here in the United States, and the only place in our entire economy that operates kind of like an old-style Soviet 5-year plan is actually the way that we do kind of defense procurement and budgeting over time. And if you compare that to the commercial tech world that I come from, which is dominated by massive demand, but that you have confidence in, but uncertainty about where that demand's going to come from, and massive competition all the way up to the moment of sale. We live in a very different world in defense. So a couple of concrete things that I think we should do differently that learn from that world. The first one is a shift from a very complex requirements-based approach to a needs-based approach. So from a 300-page document that tells the tech sector, here's exactly what we want you to go build, even though we may not know because they're the experts, it's their tech. It's a statement of the problem that we need solved operationally, with the warfighter working together with the tech leaders to then come up with solutions to that problem. That's actually what we do at DIU, but we need to scale that across the department, and that'll help us go fast and also leverage tech to really solve the problem. Second, it's about changing the dynamic to move to flexible funding, as we have at DIU, thanks to the Congress as of last year. But we need to have that, I think, at greater scale and in the services as well, and move from an approach that's based on programs of record, which may make sense for certain categories of activity, but for technology that moves at an incredibly rapid pace, it makes no sense to be identifying exactly what you're going to buy in 2 years when the thing doesn't exist yet. And so moving from programs of record to something that looks more like a portfolio of record, together with the right kind of transparency so that Congress can provide the oversight necessary to be able to move within that portfolio. Third, it's about having the talent and the porosity of talent for the department to be able to move in the right people in and out to be able to help with all of this. And we have massive numbers of people who'd actually like to help, but we make it very hard for them to do so. And then fourth, it's about the approach to risk and that dynamic that I mentioned at the end of my comments. That we've got to go from a kind of zero defect world to one in which, in the company that I used to work for, we used to talk about 100 no's for every yes. If you think about what it took for SpaceX to get to the kind of launch capability they have and how many failed launches there were before they got to those successes, compare that to the way that we do it in the government system, we've got to be much more comfortable with failure on our way to success. And that means we need to be partnered with Congress differently, because we need the Congress to help support the concept that we will fail on our way to success.
Great, that's very helpful, and honestly, it's really aligned a lot with some of the testimony we've heard from industry over the last few months or so. And we're going to get to a place pretty soon we start putting pen to paper in terms of NDA this year, and certainly if you or your staff follow up, with our committee staff. I mean, I think there's a window of opportunity here on all those issues about requirements, reform, funding, flexibility, workforce and risk. I mean, those are. We want to make sure we can, help unclog the system here, because obviously it's, the urgency of everyone's testimony this morning, I think, is the overwhelming message. So thank you all for being here. I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Courtney. And when I go to Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and amen, Mr. Beck. I think that my time here, it's pretty evident that the DoD is got a culture of a fear of failure, and I've quoted what Musk does with SpaceX a lot, where failure to him is success, because that means that's one more point of failure that won't happen because they figured it out. And so we need to get to that where DoD doesn't have a fear of failure, and then we in Congress also have to change our MO, because can you imagine if Starship were actually a NASA thing, and then second one blew up or the first one blew up, the second one wouldn't have flown for 5 years, okay? And yet he just continues to fly. So we need to get to that, all right? And failure is just part of the process, and to get us there. I'm gonna pivot a little bit. In 2017, I went to, at the time I was the mayor of Miami-Dade County, and I went to Israel because I had a fear, and I still have that fear, that our critical infrastructure, in my case, we operated the Miami International Airport, was going to be vulnerable to drones. And if I had 5 drones, I could probably stop air travel worldwide, all right, if I do something, coordinated. So my question is, by the way, we haven't done anything since 2017 that I've seen to protect
our critical infrastructure, especially airports, et cetera, and transportation infrastructure. Do we share information with the civilian sector? And how can we accelerate the sharing of information so that we can protect the homeland better? I know we're trying to do it for our warfighter. I'm okay with that. I'm happy with that. I think that's our responsibility. But are we leaving the civilian sector behind because they're just as vulnerable as the warfighter? Anybody want to take that one on? Well, Mr. Beck, it's going to fall on you. Okay.
Oh, I can start. I can lead off.
Okay.
Congressman, I believe initiatives like Replicator 2 and what's happening on the southern border will help DOD and the interagency advance our learning and coordination to identify problems here in the homeland, which is really helpful. Also, I think NORTHCOM being designated the synchronizer will help here at the homeland as well. From a JCO perspective, we have demonstrations that we do with our partners in industry. We also monthly meet with 4 to 8 industry partners to bring them in and share our perspective and then learn from them.
When you're talking industry, you're talking about the people that are making the stuff that shoots these things down, or are you talking to like the airport authorities and transportation authorities and said how to harden their infrastructure against these attacks? Mark my words, okay?
Absolutely, and I would say
this is not a question of if it's going to happen,
right?
Because Murphy says if it can, it will. Okay. And so
I would say both.
Are we working with our civilian partners that have critical infrastructure to bring some kind of capability to defend against these unmanned aerial systems?
Yes. One example of that is we perform tabletop exercises where we bring in 30 interagency partners from all over the government, state and local, to address policy and legal issues. And then we bring up issues, both CONUS and then looking at what's been learned in Ukraine and in the Middle East. So we do bring that body together to share ideas and come up with common solutions.
If I could augment too as well, General Collins from the Army, I would say yes, we have in one particular example, as we learned activities at Picatinny, the ability to do that cross-collaboration with state, local, and federal authorities. And this was everything from how we sensed in particular environments when you have a lot of collateral and you had to deconflict that, to I'd also say in the intercept to make sure that we look at things like the ability to have like net capture or tangle drones to be able to bring them down without having significant challenges in spectrum deconfliction. I would say those are other areas. And as we go through all of those battle drills, as was discussed, how you have that cross-communication and clear lines of authority are absolutely the things that we're starting to get after, not just on the M side of material, how we do that, all the coordination that goes to effect in that infrastructure with other agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Menez. We'll now go to Mr. Carbajal.
Sir, can I add one quick thing to that?
Sure.
Or I don't know. I'm not good at this, but
yeah.
Okay. So I would just add one, maybe 2 quick points. The first one is that one of the areas that we are spending an enormous amount of time on is particularly around the technologies and sensing to be able to have a much broader reach of sense, including in some of the unique ways that we can do that, not just leveraging kind of acoustic radar, 5G, LTE, but also the data that exists out there in highly populated areas, leveraging all of that to do a better job of sensing, and then leveraging AI to be able to pull all that together and do rapid decision-making based on it. So that's one thing. Second thing is, the General mentioned Replicator 2 initiative. We've actually had the FAA directly involved as part of that initiative as we've been going through it, and we will be launching just next week a low collateral defeat DIU CSO focused on those low collateral technologies for defeating drones, particularly in highly populated areas, and the FAA is part of that effort.
Thank you. Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the witnesses being here today. Being a Marine, I always get excited when we have Marines on the panel. So I have been glad to see different parts of DOD lean into commercially available technology like DIU with the Blue List. Obviously, we need to push the cutting edge and rapidly prototype to innovate and to adapt to get the warfighter what they need. Mr. Beck, can you walk me through the rationale behind the blue UAS refresh that took place in 2024? And are you worried that removing companies from the blue list will erode trust with the industrial base?
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you brought this up because so first I'll answer your specific question about what we did in 2024, but then maybe walk quickly through the evolution of blue. And I mentioned in my prepared remarks that we are right now doing a complete revamp of blue to get after exactly the challenge that I think you just alluded to. So the first is in 2024, we did a major refresh of the list in order to reflect the huge change that's come in the technologies themselves. And that was fundamentally about changing the quality, everything from electronic warfare resiliency to lethality, as well as cost, because we need these things to be less expensive, frankly, than they were. And so that's what that was all about. Now, as a reminder, the blue list primarily is, from its inception, was about ensuring that that providers of unmanned systems were vetted to be compliant with the law in terms of Chinese parts and Chinese capital. And one of the things that sort of has happened over time is frankly, the scale of the industry and the pace of the industry has outgrown the processes and the way that we work through it. So, for example, when we started Blue in 2019, there were a couple dozen companies to be thinking about vetting. By the time we actually did the first list, there were over 100 that try to get on the list, of which there were a couple of dozen that can actually meet those hard criteria of established in the law. Now there are hundreds, maybe even thousands, that could meet that list, and we are still using that same sippy straw effectively in order to vet them all in a very white glove way, one at a time, to issue an ATO. And so we're changing that now so that the compliance piece that says, does this company meet the standard that's been established in the law, and therefore are they legal to buy? We are making that, working very closely with industry, who we've been spending a lot of time on how to revamp this. We're making that a truly compliance-based list that anybody who meets those criteria can get on, and that's done constantly on an ongoing basis so that you meet the criteria, you can be on the list. And then we're taking those that actually reach that higher standard and that include those quality requirements and they're really the best of the best in terms of including, for example, one that just came on the list during this last revamp. That's the first U.S. company using only U.S. parts that's getting to Ukraine levels of both cost, with just a couple $1,000s and dropping, and thousands of units a month and rising. Taking that, and for that group, which we're going to call Blue Select, effectively giving them that white glove treatment, helping them to scale across the department. So it'll be kind of a two-tiered system. And that's really important to avoid the kind of challenges that I think you alluded to and that we've heard very much from our partners in the tech sector. The third thing I'll say on this is that those first two pieces that I talked about are important, but the biggest thing that we've got to do to really make our unmanned systems capability grow in the way that we need to is put the scale behind this, the scale of demand signal that will allow the flywheel to really go. And so that's about establishing, if I go back to my earlier comments, effectively a portfolio of record in the unmanned systems space, funding it at the right scale, and then giving the services as well as the rest of us a chance to go and help go after that.
That was actually a good filibuster in answering my question. I have limited time now, but thank you. That was very thorough. I'm going to submit these questions in hope that I can get an answer. For the record, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Carbajal. We appreciate that, and we'll make sure that your questions get submitted and answered. We'll now go to Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. You know, I echo the chairman's frustrations with the flyovers at Langley Air Force Base and other installations. I know today is more about equipment, but I want to talk to you guys about an advisory real quick. So in 2020, there was an advisory. It was put out by the Department of Justice, the Department of Transportation, let's see, FCC and the Department of Homeland Security. And the title of that advisory says, the advisory on the application of federal laws to the acquisition and use of technology to detect and mitigate unmanned aircraft systems. I believe the reason our commanders hesitate is because they're treating a remote control airplane or a drone as if it was a passenger airliner. And so I'd like to, with unanimous consent, I'd like to enter this advisory into the record.
Without objection. Without objection.
And so our team is looking at legislation to possibly amend 18 U.S.C. 32 code and basically changing the language from aircraft to manned aircraft. And I think that will get rid of the stigma that comes with that advisory that came out in 2020. So again, we've entered that in the record. But let's go back to equipment. I recently visited the Starbase in Texas, where Elon Musk is building the Starship. It can take 150 plus tons of equipment into space, and he cannot meet the demand. I mean, it's amazing how efficient he is. He puts engineers on the floor, not up in some air-conditioned office. So if you're working on a rocket and you see a weakness, you can go straight to an engineer and fix it on the assembly line. Or if you see an improvement, you can go straight to an engineer and fix it right. So every rocket gets better, better, and better. And one of the things I heard him say is he actually said when he has a project, he wants to fail as hard as possible, as fast as possible. You can imagine if it drags on forever and ever and ever. So I just want to echo the comments that you guys said. I also heard a comment, I think it was from General Stewart. You said that this UAS threat is way worse than the IED threat that we experienced in the Middle East, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And so it is a real threat. So that being the case, and I'd like to ask all members of the panel, is how are we doing on outpacing this threat at home and abroad? And we'll start with Mr. Beck.
I think we've got a long way to go. So we're making enormous progress. We are accelerating against that challenge. You could hear that up and down here. And I also think we've got a long way to go to get to the level of meeting the threat and also the level of pace of change that's necessary in the way the technology moves across sense, decide, and act to be able to meet the challenge at the scale that we see it.
Since we have limited time, let's just go real quickly. Lieutenant General Austin.
Sir, thank you for the question. I would tell you from a Marine Corps perspective, we're happy but not satisfied. We're making progress. We're fielding equipment that has the agility and the built-in open architecture to adapt and improve from a software and a hardware perspective. But we've got a ways to go to keep up with the threat and exceed the threat.
General Collins.
I would say from the Army, we're making progress, but we still have much to go on sense. As mentioned, we need to get the better ability to deconflict. There's a lot of, things that are out there that we need to discriminate these targets, understand what it is. On the decide piece, use AI with data to be able to identify and pair those with weapons. And then on the intercept, not only on kinetic, but on non-kinetic and low collateral so that we can lower the cost curve and be able to get after some of the threats that are swarms and things that go into an autonomous mode.
I think about the Patriot missile systems and things like that. Yep. Small dollars taking out big dollars.
Right.
And General Stewart.
I assess we've had some great success in the Middle East, leveraging against Group 3 one-way attacks using Coyote, APKWS, and then SM2, 3, and 6. So that was the most important and dangerous threat, the Group 3 one-way attack. Now we're seeing both home and abroad the Groups 1 and 2 smaller for swarm and mass attack.
And Mr. Beck, you mentioned that you visited Ukraine and you went to the tunnels where I guess they're producing these drones at a very low cost. How would you, if you could in this environment, how would you compare our capabilities to do the same or better to scale compared to Ukraine?
Well, I mean, I think that we need to be able to scale at a whole other level of scale. But maybe I'd make two comments. First one is that what I saw there was very impressive because you've got literally in basements and 3D printers, developers, together with warfighters, coming up with an incredibly iterative process to move. Our system is not built to do that, which is why we right now buy 4,000 or 5,000 drones a year in our system, and there are 4,000 a day being produced over there. So we're on a different scale. One thing I would that we're doing to try to get after this or help to is to link the incredible capability that we have for hardware and software in some of these emerging companies who just don't have the scalability yet with the incredible capability in advanced manufacturing that we're now seeing in the United States, everything from digital engineering all the way through the 3D printing, putting those two groups together and giving them an opportunity to effectively find each other so both can scale, which is strategic for us. That's the Blue Manufacturing Initiative that I mentioned.
Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Now go to Mr. Bell.
Thank you to the chair and ranking member. Thank you all for being here. During our hearing with Northcom, I asked General Guillot about the importance of instituting strong policies to counter UAS and to protect our military and intelligence installations. His recommendations included putting all DoD installations under Section 130I and expand the rules of engagement for drones. General Collins, what are the current capability gaps in detecting and countering drones near military installations, and how is the Joint Counter Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems Office working to address these challenges with both existing and future technologies?
Thank you, Mr. Congressman. And I think that's a very good question. I think, first, as we start to look at what we're putting out on the installations in the homeland, our ability to sense and look through the clutter that is a unique thing as part of the urban environment is one area that we're specifically looking at. I would say, too, in the DECIDE area, there's a lot of data that we get in from a lot of different sources, and as Mr. Beck mentioned, as we couple that data and we use the artificial intelligence to be able to sift through that data in what is literally milliseconds to be able to respond. And then on the intercept, how do we have the ability to have that range and to go after whether it be swarm, whether it be individual, and do so and defeat that in a very low collateral manner. So that's probably one area. I would say, too, we've been partnering closely with the JCO team on particularly in the policy. I would say, first, in the coordination that needs to go into place. We've learned a lot about how we need to be able to do that, learn those lessons, and replicate that across all those various environments. The second piece is a training aspect in which the JCO has helped, I think, across all the services, everything from how we do installation training to mobile training to everything as simple as a video that someone can go out and watch. And then as already mentioned, too, the SOPs on those battle drills to get out there and rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. And those are areas to make sure that folks are comfortable with not only the capability they have, what we're going to pursue, but the authorities that they have so that they can make sure that they make timely decisions when an incursion should occur.
May I add, Congressman, very quickly? I would say from a homeland perspective, looking at low collateral defeat mechanisms, as well as active and passive sensors, not one or the other. And then I know General Guillot is looking to expand 130I to extend to all installations. I just want to reinforce that the services, all services, are also pursuing those installations that are covered under 130I, but expanding would give us more crisis response ability. And then lastly, DoD is working to consolidate and clarify policy to prevent that policy confusion.
And Mr. Beck, what remains of some of the key technical challenges DIU is seeking to overcome in its effort to identify counter-UAS solutions for the protection of military installations, and to what extent will such technology be relevant to other federal departments and agencies?
So the areas that we're really focused on break down into that sense, decide, and act that we've all been talking about. And so, on the sensing side, the ability for our teams to be able to see what's coming. So that's new acoustic technologies. It's radar that's lower cost and smaller and can be mobile. It's leveraging 5G and LTE, and it's leveraging that commercial data. I mentioned the AI-enabled decision support, which is really a critical area, because the volume of data and the speeds that we're talking about, as the general referred to, is truly astronomical, and that's a major area that we're focused on. And frankly, where the commercial tech sector has capabilities that are immediately applicable that we need to figure out how to get on board. And we're in the middle of doing that. In fact, we have a project with the Army right now that we're working very closely on exactly that. And then on the from a commercial tech sector, in particular on the ACT side, it's really about those low collateral interceptors and getting after those solutions, whether it's through electronic means or low kinetic ballistics means or other forms of bringing those drones down. And those solutions, I think, are extremely applicable to others, not just to us.
I think that's my time. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Appreciate it. We'll now go to Mr. Hamadeh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Collins, there's a huge contrast between what Israel was able to accomplish jointly with the U.S. and partners in stopping hundreds of missiles and drones, and we saw how just one drone was used to tragically kill our soldiers in Jordan. Now, are we better able to counter drone threats in the region than when Iran barraged Israel last year?
Mr. Congressman, I think we have been able to take the lessons learned, and we are better off as we start to take a look at how we've pre-positioned capability, how we have put out our ability to sense, to distribute. There are things that we have done in our intercept capability, specifically on the time to launch, from the time to seek and the time to be able to destroy, so that we've been able to learn. And then as we start to look, and we've partnered with the JCO, as we start to see various parts of the threat, specifically in the Group 3, how they increase speed, how they increase altitude and maneuverability, making sure that we are not only keeping pace, but getting ahead of the pace of how that we get, we're able to address those threats. Also within the layering of the capability, taking a look at other alternative means from both kinetic and non-kinetic means to provide a multi-layered approach for protection.
And could our outposts or even a major base such as Al Udeid in Qatar sustain such a barrage and wave of drones attack?
I think we'd need to, you know, at every one of those sites, we've looked at the threat profile to make sure that we've got the appropriate mechanisms to defend each one of those sites.
Mr. Beck, in your view as Director of the Defense Innovation Unit, how could a partnership with Israel help bring us up to speed?
So I think there are probably two forms of getting to kind of specific technologies. The first one is actively learning from the experience that the Israelis are having, where they're putting obviously an enormous amount of effort into the challenge. They're seeing it every single day. And they have extremely adept technology in Israel, plus they're very adept at leveraging technology from the rest of the world. And so we actively learn from what they're doing in the DIU. And then the second piece is specific kit, specific technology, specific companies that are doing that in Israel. And one of the things about DIU, when we will, if the very best capability is from one of our allies or partners, we will we'll take that on board. And sometimes one of the 2 or 3 prototypes that we end up awarding to will be from one of our allies or partners.
Thank you. And General Austin, the 2021 NDAA requested a Joint Electronic Warfare Training Range Plan. Are you familiar with that?
I am not, sir.
Okay, we're going to submit this question for the record. I hope just get a response, okay?
Absolutely.
And I know we have got votes coming up. Mr. Chairman, I will submit my final questions for the record. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Hamadeh. And I would encourage other members, too, if you have additional questions, to submit them for the record in the face of us having a pending vote and then a lot of people getting ready to head back to their districts. We will do that. And I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. This has been incredibly helpful. It will indeed inform what happens in this year's NDAA, where I think we need to take some additional steps forward. I know there's been a lot of discussion about 130I. I look at it and believe that the authorities are there. I think a lot of times there's hesitancy on other agencies for various and sundry reasons. Many are not related to the threats that we face on the base, but again, you know, trying to mitigate what they believe is their risk. I think it's fairly clear on the 130I what we can do and what we need to do. But we will make sure we provide a little refinement there in this year's NDAA. So again, I want to thank our panel today. Thank you so much for your reflection on what we need to do. Thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for pushing this issue forward. It is incredibly important for us to be able to do these things, especially in light of all the other tangential information that's come out in the last 8 months on drone sightings across the nation. I think people are in a heightened state of awareness on this, and when they ask about what's happening on our military bases, they want to feel confident that we are responding and responding quickly. So I appreciate the panel, and if there are no further comments, this subcommittee stands adjourned.